Hello, you're back with the Lone Wolf. Welcome to the channel. Today's article, we're going through a piece from Refinery 29 by Zoe Beatty from about 18 months ago. And it's called What Single Men Really Think About Dating in Their 30s. So this is written by, obviously, a woman. But I'm a single man in my 30s, so we'll soon see if this resonates with me. When my last relationship ended, there was a sense of excitement from some of my male friends in relationships. John, 36, from Manchester, is telling me. In their eyes, I could once again play the field and do some of the things that they probably secretly wanted to do. Depending on where you look and who you listen to, there is an idea that being single in your 30s is normal and even to be desired. I think that's a bit of an oversimplification, to say the least. The reality is quite different. The messaging about being single is conflicting. It is simultaneously cast as consistently fun and ultimately tragic, essential for fulfillment, but only truly acceptable in the past tense. As women, depending on when we were born, we know precisely what single life in our late 20s and 30s looks like. A heady mix of Bridget Jones, Carrie Bradshaw, and more recently, or rather more refreshingly, Lizzo. As an identity, straight female singledom is so packed with emotion that we have entire genres dedicated to it. We speak about it frequently. We rail against it when it becomes stereotyped or commodified, trite or just plain degrading. But what do we know about the same things when it comes to the straight male experience? James Bond? John floats when I ask about societal depictions to which single men are expected to relate. Too broken to emotionally attach, so he just F's women and kills people. Not exactly relatable, is it? There don't seem to be many male role models living happy, healthy single lives well into middle age, he says. There is an established, albeit very tired narrative attached to single men in their late 20s and 30s that they are players, the bachelors, picky or dangerously non-committal. The sticky trope that men don't or won't speak about their feelings comes into play too, along with other burdens of toxic masculinity. Unsurprisingly, as John says, there's a lot more to it than that. People seem to think that the same pressures put on women to settle down aren't there with men, says 28-year-old Dean Westbrook, a travel consultant from Wimbledon. It is to a lesser extent with men, of course, but I still have those very optimistic older relatives that send me Christmas cards, like to my grandson and partner, because they assume that I must have settled down by now. I'm an only child and I know my mum would like grandkids. There is a pressure, he says. Studies show that he's not the only one to feel this way. 71% of single men told a 2017 eHarmony survey that they felt pressure to get into a relationship, compared to 58% of women. You just can't let expectations weigh on you, he adds. For me, I think the quieter stuff, the week-to-week stuff, is more relevant. A lot of my friends are in relationships, so when it gets to the weekend and I'm asking what everyone is doing, suddenly every man and his dog is off to Centre Parks. You can't help but think about what everyone else is doing, and then, what am I doing? I do think men need to talk about loneliness and disconnection more, especially men who are single and feel cut adrift, John says. I think John needs some hobbies and pursuits that he can engage in. He came out of a 6-year relationship in July 2019. Most of my friends are in long-term relationships. You can find yourself alone, and men are terrible at asking for help or surrounding themselves with friends, in my experience. I would disagree. I think men are very, very good at getting involved in numerous activities and pursuits and clubs and generally having fun. I think this is partly because as you get older you stop making new friends, but also because there's a perverse sense that men should be lone wolves who shouldn't engage with their emotions. You see this a lot in books and films, generally the ones that appeal to men to help them shore up this image. It's a vicious cycle. I'm lucky in that I have male friends I can talk to about my feelings who have been through similar things, so I could talk to them about being lonely. But I think that's not too common, and I worry for the men who don't have people around them that they can talk to about feeling alone, because it's such a horrible feeling. I can see why the self-termination rate among men my age is so high, because it can really feel like you've failed at life, especially if you buy into society's messages about what it is to be a man. Some studies show that single men report higher levels of loneliness than the majority of other social groups. Others claim that women are better at talking about loneliness. That's not without consequences. Male midlife depression is very common between the ages of 35 and 50, and self-termination rates are frighteningly high. They're frighteningly high in young men as well, though, let's be honest, especially in men in their 20s. Elliot Small, 30, head of a central London IT department, has been single for a few years after a 4-year relationship came to an end. While he's not actively looking for a relationship currently, he is open to it. But he says that finding a meaningful connection, especially in the age of apps, is increasingly difficult. I feel you there, brother. Absolutely 100%. I guess I'm okay with being single, but I would like to find someone. The accessibility of being able to connect with so many people constantly seems to have ruined something. It feels fickle. People are so fast-paced. They're texting lots of different people at once. I feel like girls might do this more than men. It can make you feel insecure. There is a slight defensiveness to the way Elliot speaks about this subject, which I come up against several times when researching this feature. Some men are embarrassed to talk about it, others worry about how it will make them look. To say publicly that they're single and not happy about it. This pressure is universal, it seems. It's not cool to admit that you want to be loved, but we all do. Unsurprisingly, background also has a big impact on attitudes towards being single among the men I speak to. John tells me that his single friends who have confessed they would really prefer to be in a relationship often have parents who are still together and want to emulate that. Dean's healthy outlook, I'm lucky I have lots of lovely friends, I'm just trying to be decent, seems to reflect his secure family life. Elliot, on the other hand, whose mother is Russian and father is British, went through divorce as a kid before being sent to boarding school. His views are quite sharp-edged. He talks about men seeking breeding and seems resentful of women at times. Later he says that there is no R culture in Britain or the US, and urges me to look up the stats on false reporting. He feels that men can be treated as disposable by women in modern dating. This is something that Dean agrees with, though. Yeah, it's true. Men are disposable, essentially, for a large part of their lives, especially in their earlier years as well. And we've spoken about it on this channel about the divorce rates and the dangers of marriage to a lot of men. It's basically especially on apps. Women go shopping on apps, whereas men, it's a job interview. I had a bad date last month, Dean explains. It was a third date and we went to a small gig. I'm not a bad person or offensive or anything, and we seemed to get on well, but she walked out halfway through the gig. I didn't think that was very nice. I think a lot of people of any gender feel that the impersonal nature of apps mean you don't have to be polite. Human decency is a little lost there. While John has only flirted with apps so far, he has found them to be both good and bad. They're good, he says, because he has met people in similar situations to himself. I've found there isn't a mad panic about being single. People have their own ideas about where they want to go. So it's nice to know those anxieties about being single aren't necessarily founded. Rejection and plain bad behaviour can badly affect your mental well-being, though, as Dean says. Being single and dating is fun, but it's also exhausting. You have to be resilient and sure of yourself, otherwise it can just leave you feeling more alone. John adds that he's found with apps you can feel you're competing for attention and matches, etc. It's a cold and impersonal environment, and depending on how much emphasis you put on meeting someone there, it can really cause emotional distress. I think men are more susceptible to this because they often don't have the same emotional toolkit to navigate the world of online communication that women have or require. No, I think you need to foster an abundance mentality. You need to be happy with where you are yourself. If this emotional distress is being caused by dating apps, that's because you've got a scarcity mentality and you still have this unfounded hope that you're going to be one of the successful ones that is successful with dating through apps. It's just completely nonsense. It's very, very difficult to be successful on dating apps full stop. As a man, you can be a very high quality man, you can have a lot of money, you can be very confident, you can have a lot going for you, you can be in shape, and it's still extremely difficult to prosper on dating apps. So I think you're on a hiding to nothing there, and the best thing to do is just delete the apps. Many of our discussions are underpinned by a familiar feeling that we're being boxed into identities or stereotypes that we feel uncomfortable in, or that wider social gender stereotyping is created in the first place. The men I speak to all recall moments of being on the negative end of a stereotype and feeling trapped by it. For instance, John has noticed that he feels he often has to justify why he's single at 36. When I do explain I've come out of a 7-year relationship, I'm immediately given more leeway, as if it's okay to be a victim of circumstance rather than a philanderer who is too afraid to commit. Why do you care about these people's opinions? It doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. If you're happy living your life at 36, single, you don't have to provide an excuse. This lack of security is mind-boggling. I think the most shameful trope for single men in their 30s is the guy too afraid to commit and settle down who just wants it all his own way. That's a really toxic stereotype that makes men feel insecure, in my opinion. Yeah, it is, but if you just don't disregard it, if you just don't care about it, who cares? Yeah, it might well be a toxic stereotype, but if you don't value the opinions of others and just focus on yourself and whether you're being true to yourself and the environment, it doesn't really matter, does it? Another friend confides in me that people assume he is an overgrown child because he's 38 and single. A woman in his office made a joke about him not being able to clean and cook. For what it's worth, said friend had competed on a MasterChef special in the past and won. That's brilliant. Says he can't clean and cook and he's an actual very successful chef. I don't think people think my life is very serious because I'm single, 38 and don't have kids, he says. Due to financial necessity, he lives in a house share in London, which he says doesn't help. Well, yeah, but in London you have to live in a house share because London is so overpriced. Everyone wants to live there. It's overpopulated. And if you don't share accommodation, you're going to be paying through the nose, and it's not going to be possible, even for someone who's 38, to have a place in London on their own, unless they're an absolute baller. And just as there's a poisonous and unfounded narrative of failure imposed on unmarried women in their late 30s, John thinks that people don't understand that there's a feeling of failure around having a relationship end in your 30s. As a man too, for men who constantly receive messages about taking responsibility, achieving and winning, this can be a really big blow. Ultimately, being single is fine, being isolated is not, and there isn't enough space created in society for men to be one and not the other. Yeah, so that article didn't really go in the direction that I thought it was going to go. Let's see if there's any comments here. I've been told that dating in your 30s as a man is one of the most successful eras, because hopefully you have more going for you, more financial abundance, your career is more established, you still maintain your appearance, whereas on the flip side, women are starting to decline for the most part. Old School says, as an almost 37-year-old single, never married man with no kids, life is great. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Zero stress, with the dollar to do whatever you want. Complete freedom. I concur. We've got a spam link here, I think. Yeah, more spam. Spam. Yeah, so what the message that this article says to me is that these people actually need hobbies and they need to get out. They're placing too much value around their relationship status. They think that their relationships are the only thing that matter in their lives. And what they need to do actually is to continue to drive towards their own goal. Like, they need to make their goals and their career and the meaning of their life beyond a relationship. That's what needs to happen. You know, should go traveling or something. Go see new cultures. Build multiple strands of income, and not worry too much about what their family is saying about them or what the culture is saying or shaming them. They're putting too much value on this shaming language, or the sign language, as Kevin Samuels would say. Yeah. So although the article didn't really go in the direction I was thinking it would go, they're actually the reality of dating. I mean, you could have approached 3 completely different single men who said actually dating is great in their 30s because they've just got an endless volume of options that they can exercise anytime they want, and they don't have to commit. They're not even going to commit. And it's probably one of the most successful phases of dating going, especially if you're going to follow like a lone wolf lifestyle. So I hope you enjoyed that breakdown, and I'll see you in the next video.